The Velthari Empire had conquered 17 star systems without resistance. Their plasma cannons could melt cities in seconds. Their ships blocked out suns. Their generals laughed at the idea of ground combat because no species had ever been foolish enough to face them directly. They were gods among the stars, and they knew it. When they arrived at the edge of human space, they expected the same quick surrender they always received. They sent their demands through every communication channel. Bow down, surrender your resources, become slaves, or become ash. The choice was simple. The humans did not respond with words. On the planet called New Valhalla, deep in the northern mountains, where snow fell year-round and the winds could freeze a man solid in minutes, a signal light blinked inside a massive stone hall. Chief Ragnar Thornson stood from his wooden throne and walked slowly toward the ancient horn mounted on the wall. His muscles rippled beneath scarred skin as he lifted the horn from its resting place. This horn had been carried from old Earth itself, a relic from a time when his ancestors fought with axes and shields instead of plasma rifles and power armor. The Velthari had made a terrible mistake. They had studied human cities. They had analyzed human governments. They had calculated human military strength based on their official armies. But they had never looked at New Valhalla. They had never learned about the warrior clans who rejected soft civilization and chose to live the old ways among the stars. Ragnar walked outside into the freezing wind. Snow swirled around his massive frame. He wore no shirt despite the cold because his people believed that true warriors welcomed hardship. His long red beard was braided with metal rings that clinked together as he moved. On his arms were tattoos telling the stories of 100 battles fought across a dozen worlds. He had killed pirates with his bare hands. He had wrestled alien beasts until they submitted or died. He was called the Mountain That Walks, and every warrior in the Northern Territories knew his name. He raised the horn to his lips and blew. The sound rolled across the mountains like thunder. It echoed through valleys and bounced off frozen lakes. It reached villages and camps scattered across thousands of kilometers of wilderness. Every warrior who heard it felt their blood turn to fire. Every warrior knew what the call meant. War had come, real war, the kind their ancestors had dreamed about. In a village 300 kilometers to the east, a woman named Freya Ironhand heard the call while sharpening her battle axe. She was the champion of her clan, undefeated in single combat for 15 years. Her arms were thick as tree branches from a lifetime of training. She smiled when she heard the horn because she had grown bored of peace. Within minutes, she had gathered her warriors and begun the march toward the Great Hall. In the southern valleys, a man named Eric Stormburn heard the call while training his young students in the art of war. He was old now, his hair white as snow, but his body was still hard as iron. He had fought in the pirate wars 50 years ago and still carried the scars proudly. His students looked at him with eager eyes, and he nodded slowly. Today they would graduate from students to warriors. Across the entire Northern Territory, the same scene repeated itself again and again. Warriors stopped their daily tasks. They picked up weapons that had been cleaned and maintained for years in preparation for this moment. They kissed their families goodbye with pride instead of tears because their culture taught that dying in battle was the greatest honor any human could achieve. They came from frozen tundras and mountain peaks. They came from deep forests and hidden caves. They came on foot and on massive war beasts bred for combat. They came alone and in groups of hundreds. All of them moved toward the same destination, guided by ancient paths carved into the mountains generations ago. Ragnar stood at the entrance of the Great Hall and watched them arrive. First came dozens, then hundreds, then thousands. They filled the valley below like a rising tide of muscle and iron. Their war chants echoed off the mountains. Their feet shook the frozen ground. Steam rose from their bodies in the cold air because the fire in their blood kept them warm. When the sun set on the third day, 10,000 warriors stood before the Great Hall. 10,000 voices roared Ragnar's name when he stepped forward to address them. The sound was so loud that satellites in orbit detected it as seismic activity. The Velthari watched from their ships in confused silence. Their scanners showed a massive gathering of life forms, but their tactical computers could not understand what they were seeing. These humans carried primitive weapons alongside advanced ones. They wore fur and leather instead of proper military uniforms. They gathered in the open without defensive formations or tactical positioning. According to every military doctrine the Velthari knew, these humans were behaving like animals, not soldiers. The Velthari commander, a tall creature with silver scales and 6 eyes, ordered a demonstration of power. A single plasma beam lanced down from orbit and vaporized an empty mountain peak 3 kilometers from the gathering. The explosion created a mushroom cloud that blocked out the stars. The shockwave knocked snow from every surface for 50 kilometers in all directions. The commander expected screaming. He expected panic. He expected the primitives to scatter like frightened prey animals. Instead, he heard cheering. 10,000 voices roared their approval at the display of power. They beat their weapons against their shields and stomped their feet in unison. They were not afraid of the fire from the sky. They welcomed it. In their culture, worthy enemies were rare and precious things. The Velthari had just proven themselves worthy of being fought. Ragnar raised his fist for silence, and silence came instantly. He spoke in a voice that carried across the entire valley because he had trained his lungs to project sound like a weapon. The enemy had come from the stars, he said. The enemy thought humans were weak. The enemy thought humans would kneel and beg for mercy. The enemy was about to learn the truth that every species learned eventually. Humans were not sheep waiting for slaughter. Humans were wolves pretending to be sheep until the hunters came too close. The warriors roared their agreement. The Velthari commander received reports that made no sense to him. The humans were not building defensive positions. They were not evacuating civilians. They were not attempting to negotiate. Instead, they were loading themselves into hundreds of small spacecraft hidden in mountain caves. These ships were old and battered, clearly designed for short-range transport rather than warfare. The tactical computers calculated that the ships could not possibly threaten the Velthari fleet. The computers were correct about the ships. They were wrong about the humans inside them. The first wave of human ships launched directly toward the Velthari fleet. Point defense systems activated and began destroying the primitive craft with casual efficiency. Explosions blossomed across the void as ship after ship was torn apart. The Velthari commander watched with bored satisfaction as the numbers counted down. 700 ships destroyed. 800. 900. Then the boarding parties hit. The Velthari had focused so completely on destroying the ships that they had not noticed the smaller objects being ejected before each explosion. Human warriors in armored suits, propelled by single-use thrusters, flying through the debris of their own destroyed ships. They crashed into Velthari hulls at incredible speeds. Their magnetic boots locked them in place. Their plasma cutters began slicing through armored plating. The first Velthari soldier to encounter a human warrior inside his own ship died with an expression of complete confusion on his face. He had drawn his weapon. He had aimed properly. He had fired accurately. The plasma bolt had hit the human directly in the chest. The human had kept coming. The human had grabbed the Velthari's weapon arm and torn it off with one brutal motion. The human had then used that severed arm as a club to beat its former owner to death. Throughout the Velthari fleet, similar scenes of horror unfolded. The Velthari were taller than humans. They were faster than humans. Their technology was superior in every measurable way. But they had evolved on a peaceful world with low gravity and no natural predators. They had never developed the capacity for physical violence that humans carried in their DNA. Humans had evolved by killing everything around them. They had killed animals for food. They had killed other humans for resources and territory. They had spent millions of years becoming the most efficient killing machines their planet had ever produced. And when they finally reached the stars, they brought that terrible inheritance with them. Ragnar led the assault on the flagship personally. He had modified his power armor to leave his arms exposed because he wanted to feel his enemies die beneath his hands. Behind him came Freya Ironhand with her plasma axe, cutting through Velthari soldiers like they were made of paper. Behind her came Eric Stormburn and his students, finally getting the graduation ceremony they deserved. The Velthari commander ordered his remaining ships to retreat. This broke every tradition of his species, which valued honor above survival. But he had realized something important in the past hour. His species had confused technology with strength. They had believed that advanced weapons made them powerful. They had been wrong. True power was the willingness to charge directly at death and laugh as it approached. True power was the ability to lose everything and keep fighting anyway. True power was what burned in the hearts of these primitive humans who should have been terrified, but instead seemed to be having the time of their lives. The Velthari fled. The humans did not chase them. They had achieved their objective, which was proving that humanity could not be conquered without cost. Other species watching from the edges of known space saw the battle and took careful notes. The lesson spread quickly through the galaxy. Humans were not like other species. Humans were not logical or predictable or safe. Humans were the thing that predators feared, the prey that had learned to bite back harder than any predator could endure. The galaxy had many powerful empires and advanced civilizations, but none of them wanted to discover what humans were capable of when truly pushed to their limits. Ragnar returned to New Valhalla as a hero. The surviving warriors built monuments to the fallen and sang songs that would be passed down for generations. The ancient horn was placed back on its wall, waiting for the next time its call would be needed. In the cold mountains of a distant world, 10,000 warriors had answered that call. They had proven that humanity's greatest weapon was not technology or numbers or resources. It was the unconquerable spirit that burned in every human heart, the absolute refusal to accept defeat under any circumstances. The stars belonged to those who were willing to pay the price for them. The humans had paid in blood and fire and savage joy, and they would do it again whenever necessary, because that was simply what humans did. They fought, they bled, they won, and the galaxy had finally learned to be afraid.